Welcome in, everyone. If you're listening today, we are taking you on a deep dive into something that, honestly, totally shifted how I look at the world.
Yeah, it's a pretty mind-bending topic.
It really is. I mean, usually when we talk about massive global problems, whether it's the environment or, new technology, there's this expectation of precision. Like you expect an engineering equation.
Right. You want to identify the pollutant, isolate it, build some kind of filter, and boom, problem solved.
Exactly. Broken, then fixed. It's very binary. But if you've been feeling, I don't know, completely overwhelmed by the constant doom and gloom news about where tech and the environment are heading, this deep dive offers a totally different way to look at it.
It's a much more empowering perspective, honestly.
Yeah, it is. We're looking at a fascinating philosophical essay today. It's titled Contamination as Mirror: AI, Water, and the Consciousness Behind Systems. And our mission is to explore this premise that connects two massive, seemingly totally unrelated things.
Artificial intelligence and our natural water systems.
Right. And the goal is to figure out what these two domains actually reveal about human consciousness and how shifting our perspective might be the ultimate key to fixing them both.
Which, sounds like a huge stretch at first.
Oh, absolutely.
You've got Silicon Valley algorithms running on these massive server farms on one hand, and then, the watershed of a local river basin on the other. But the author bridges these two with something called the mirror principle.
The mirror principle.
Yeah. The core argument is that both AI and water are, at their most fundamental level, simply mediums. They are completely neutral.
So when the essay calls them neutral mediums, my assumption is that it means they don't possess like a moral compass of their own. They operate as a blank slate.
That's exactly it.
Like a carrier wave in a radio signal that just transmits whatever frequency you pump into it.
That is exactly the mechanics of it. Let's look at water first. Chemically, water is known as the universal solvent. Because of its molecular structure, it naturally dissolves and absorbs more substances than any other liquid. It merely carries the physical and chemical character of what it flows through. So if water flows through a pristine, undisturbed alpine landscape, it dissolves trace minerals from the rocks, it carries organic matter, and it becomes biologically rich.
It takes on the character of the environment.
Exactly. But if that exact same water passes through a landscape dominated by industrial runoff or, urban sprawl, it absorbs heavy metals, microplastics, synthetic chemicals.
Yeah.
The water itself didn't decide to become toxic. It just reliably carried what it was given.
Which brings up an analogy that I couldn't stop thinking about while reading this. It's essentially the mechanics of making your morning coffee.
Oh, yeah, the coffee filter analogy.
Right. The water you pour from your kettle is totally neutral. But when you force that boiling water through dark, bitter, heavily roasted coffee grounds, you get a dark, bitter drink in your mug.
Yeah, you do.
And you would never look at that mug and blame the water for the taste of the coffee. The water is just the delivery mechanism for the grounds you chose to put in the filter.
And yet, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the essay points out that blaming the water is exactly how we approach our global systems.
We totally do.
We obsess over the symptoms, we stare at the bitter coffee or the contaminated river or the biased hallucinating AI model, and we try to treat the end product while completely ignoring the root cause.
We're staring at the dark liquid and trying to chemically alter it instead of just looking at the coffee filter.
Yes, we're ignoring the quality of human consciousness and intention that built the systems in the first place. And this is where the mechanics of AI map perfectly onto the behavior of water.
Because AI isn't an independent thinker.
No, not at all. It is a vast statistical mirror held up to the aggregate of human output. And the essay emphasizes a really crucial mechanical detail here. In large language models, the data doesn't just sit there passively.
Right, it's doing something with it.
Exactly. The algorithms use these complex attention mechanisms to assign mathematical weight to the patterns they find in our training data. They look at frequency, intensity, proximity of words and concepts.
So every text, every image, every angry comment we post.
Every single panicked social media thread we feed into it is compressed, mapped into a vector space, and spat back out. What goes in comes back out.
But magnified, right?
Yes. Because of how the algorithm optimizes for dominant patterns, it comes back out louder and more concentrated.
Man, that is... Okay, so if these systems are essentially hyper-efficient mirrors of our consciousness, we really have to take a hard look at what we are currently projecting into them.
We really do.
Because right now, looking around, the primary input seems to be just sheer panic.
Oh, absolutely. Pure panic.
If you look at both the AI discourse and the environmental discourse, they're dominated by the exact same narrative. Powerful forces are completely out of control, catastrophe is practically inevitable, and ordinary people are just helpless victims.
The author is very explicit about this parallel. The narrative arc in both domains is identical. It's a story of inevitable doom.
Yeah.
And what makes it so pervasive is that this narrative is almost always presented under the guise of realism.
Right, like it's the only logical conclusion.
Exactly. It's framed as the only intellectually honest, rational response to the data we have.
I do have to push back on that framing, though, and I'm sure you listening might be thinking the exact same thing right now.
Sure.
The data is terrifying. Like, we aren't making these things up. The essay itself doesn't shy away from the facts. It brings up very real, measurable realities.
It does.
We're finding microplastics in every ocean, literally in human blood. We've got PFAS compounds, these forever chemicals, deeply embedded in global groundwater supplies.
Yeah, agricultural runoff causing massive dead zones.
Exactly. And on the tech side, AI is actively being used to automate phishing scams, generate deepfakes, amplify all this misinformation. These are existential threats. So shouldn't we be afraid? Fear seems like a completely rational response to a real threat in the room.
It is a totally valid response. And the expert, or rather the author of the essay, validates that the data is real and demands a serious response.
Right.
This is not some manifesto for toxic positivity or complacency. The contamination is physical, it's measurable, and we have to deal with it. However, the essay draws a sharp systemic distinction between data-informed awareness and what it calls ambient dread.
Ambient dread. Wow. That is the perfect term for that low-level hum of anxiety you feel, just like scrolling through a newsfeed on a Tuesday morning.
Oh, yeah. And there is a physiological and algorithmic mechanism behind why that ambient dread is so incredibly dangerous.
Break that down for me.
Biologically, fear is a state governed by the amygdala. When you are in a state of fear, your brain floods with cortisol and adrenaline.
Fight or flight.
Exactly. And this fundamentally narrows your attention. It directs all of your cognitive resources toward immediate threat detection and shuts down the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for nuanced, creative problem solving.
Oh, wow. So you literally lose the neurological capacity to invent complex solutions when you're panicked.
Yes. So a society operating in a state of chronic ambient dread is biologically handicapping its ability to fix the exact problems it's terrified of.
That makes so much sense. We're literally making ourselves too dumb to fix the problem.
Basically, yeah. And then you apply that to the algorithms. Fear is not a neutral state in a digital medium. Because human brains are wired to pay attention to threats, engagement algorithms have learned that high arousal, negative emotions like fear and outrage keep users clicking.
Right. So the system is actively hunting for and promoting that ambient dread.
Exactly. If we make water policy based on panic rather than observing the slow, long-term patterns of an ecosystem, the resulting policy is panicked and usually creates secondary disasters.
And if we train AI on content produced by a fear-saturated culture?
That AI model mathematically weights that fear as the most important human trait. The ambient dread becomes the foundational training data. It literally becomes the contamination.
So our fear is breaking the system, which means if we follow the essay's logic, we have to radically shift our baseline assumption. We have to recognize that health, not sickness, is the natural default of these systems.
That's the paradigm shift.
Reading that, the very first thing that came to mind was the human immune system.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right? Like, you don't have to consciously manufacture your health. You don't sit there manually instructing your white blood cells to attack a germ you inhaled on the subway.
Oh, the body just does it.
Exactly. Your only real job is to stop doing things that actively destroy your body's baseline ability to heal itself. You stop depriving yourself of sleep, you stop eating garbage, and the baseline of health just naturally reasserts itself.
And that maps flawlessly onto the essay's observations about ecology, particularly how we misunderstand clean water.
How so?
Well, we have this cultural habit of treating clean water as a fragile, artificial state. Like, it's this delicate exception that we have to constantly defend from the inevitable spread of contamination. But the essay argues that clean water is actually the baseline. It is the default condition that natural systems continuously and aggressively tend toward.
Because a healthy watershed is essentially a giant self-cleaning machine.
Yes, and the physical mechanics of it are staggering when you really look at it. A thriving watershed doesn't need a chemical treatment plant. It uses physical filtration porous rocks like basalt and sandstone physically trap sediment.
Wow.
It uses biological filtration. The intricate root systems of riparian plants bind the soil and absorb excess nitrogen.
And microbes, right.
Exactly, microbial ecosystems. Billions of bacteria form biofilms on river stones that literally digest organic waste and pollutants. The river cleans itself. It doesn't need us to invent health for it.
It just needs human non-interference.
Or at least for human behavior to align with the system's own regenerative logic, rather than just imposing this rigid industrial logic over it. Health isn't harder to produce than sickness. It's an emergent property of the right conditions.
Applying that concept to artificial intelligence is a massive paradigm shift. Because right now, the tech industry treats AI the exact same way we treat a polluted river.
Yes, they do.
We assume the model is inherently dangerous or toxic, so we try to bolt on all these external guardrails. We try to hard code ethics into the machine, as if wisdom is just a software patch we can engineer from scratch and force onto the system.
Which the essay argues is a fundamental misunderstanding of the medium. You cannot engineer your way to a wise AI from a culture that no longer values wisdom in its day-to-day output.
It reflects what we give it.
Right. AI exhibits a structural analog to the watershed. A language model trained on high-quality, diverse, honest, and thoughtful human communication will naturally produce correspondingly high-quality intelligence.
The intelligence isn't manufactured out of thin air.
No, it emerges from the baseline we provide. If we want healthy AI, we just have to stop actively disrupting the conditions, meaning our own communication and culture, that allow a healthy reflection to emerge.
But to actually understand these self-correcting baselines, the essay suggests we need a completely different way of processing information, a way of looking at the world that our traditional institutions often reject outright.
Yeah, the author calls it pattern recognition.
Pattern recognition. Let's dig into that because the essay makes a really strong case for it as a legitimate epistemology.
Right, epistemology being the philosophical term for how we know, what constitutes valid knowledge.
Exactly. And the author defines pattern recognition as the ability to perceive structural similarities across different domains. It's the capacity to intuitively feel the shape or the health of a whole system before you have the data to articulate all its individual components.
It sounds like what we casually call intuition.
Or what an artist uses when they know a painting is finished, even if they can't mathematically explain why.
Yes, it is the root of artistic intelligence, and it's what many ancient traditions would simply call wisdom. But mainstream institutional knowledge, particularly in the West, frequently dismisses this feeling-based perception.
Oh, totally. If you can't quantify it in a spreadsheet, institutions label it magical thinking.
Or emotional reasoning, yeah.
But the historical context the author provided for this was fascinating because history is absolutely packed with examples where formal, data-driven methodology scoffed at pattern recognition, only to be proven spectacularly wrong decades later.
The text highlights several really striking historical examples. Think about the germ theory of disease.
Oh, the Semmelweis story.
Yes. In the 1840s, a doctor named Ignaz Semmelweis noticed a pattern. Women in maternity wards staffed by doctors who had just come from performing autopsies were dying at horrific rates.
Which is just awful to think about.
Totally. But wards staffed by midwives had much lower mortality. He couldn't see the bacteria microscopes just weren't powerful enough yet to identify specific pathogens. But he recognized the pattern and suggested doctors, wash their hands.
Seems obvious now.
Right. But the medical establishment mocked him. They actually drove him out of the profession because he lacked the empirical mechanism to prove his theory.
The data hadn't caught up to the pattern yet.
Exactly. And the same thing happened with continental drift.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Alfred Wegener noticed the continents looked like puzzle pieces, specifically South America and Africa, and he found similar fossil patterns on both coasts. He intuitively felt the shape of the system.
But let me guess, no mechanism.
Exactly. Because he couldn't explain the mechanism of plate tectonics, he was ridiculed by the geological establishment for decades. In all these cases, intuitive pattern recognition arrived at the truth long before a formal methodology could measure it.
The danger there, though, is that humans are practically wired to see patterns that aren't actually there.
They absolutely are.
We see faces in clouds, we connect unrelated events and create conspiracy theories. So if you're listening to this and trying to apply it, how do we know when our pattern recognition is actual, deep, systemic wisdom and when it's just our own confirmation bias?
The essay doesn't shy away from that danger at all. It's very careful not to romanticize pattern recognition at the expense of empirical data.
Okay, good.
Pattern recognition is subject to human bias. But, and this is the crucial point for a point, empirical measurement is also deeply flawed.
Oh, for sure.
Data science is subject to its own systematic errors, its own funding biases, and the constraints of whatever paradigm it operates within.
We've all seen how data can be manipulated. You just change the parameters of the study or selectively omit variables, and the spreadsheet tells whatever story the funding source wants to hear.
Right. And this brings us to the concept of epistemic contamination.
Epistemic contamination.
Yeah, this happens when we reflexively rank one mode of knowing as vastly superior to the other. Let's look at a real-world example from the text. Imagine a data scientist and an indigenous elder managing a forest.
Okay.
The data scientist might rely entirely on empirical measurements, soil nitrogen levels, rainfall charts, timber yield projections, and based on the spreadsheet, the forest looks highly optimized and totally healthy. But the elder, using pattern recognition, walks through the forest and intuitively feels that the understory is brittle, the fungal networks are receding, the insect chorus is wrong. The elder senses the system is on the verge of collapse.
And if the institution only values the spreadsheet, they will completely ignore the elder's warning.
And that is epistemic contamination. It is the arrogance of assuming that what can be measured is all that matters. When forestry management actually did this in the 20th century, optimizing only for timber yield and ignoring the holistic patterns, it led to massive forest die-offs and catastrophic wildfires.
Wow.
The author's point is that both empirical measurement and pattern recognition are complementary halves of a whole.
Yeah.
They are just observing different aspects of the same reality.
We need the spreadsheet to verify the intuition.
And we need the intuition to tell us if the spreadsheet is measuring the right things.
I love that. So if we can manage to synthesize these two approaches, if we can look at AI and water without the paralysis of ambient dread, if we can recognize their natural baselines of health, and understand them using both hard data and systemic intuition, what is the actual mechanism for change?
Right, how do we fix it?
Yeah, if you are listening to this, what is the most effective way to interact with these massive systems?
The essay argues for a strategy that honestly often frustrates activists.
Which is?
Joining the system to change it.
Oh, wow. That is deeply counterintuitive. Usually when we identify a system as corrupt or contaminated, our immediate moral instinct is to boycott it.
Yeah, we want to stand on the outside, refuse to participate, and just throw rocks at the building.
Exactly.
But the author observes the physics of large systems. A massive, momentum-carrying system like global capitalism, infrastructure, tech monopolies, it rarely collapses just because people critique it from the outside.
Just ignores them.
Or it simply absorbs the external resistance and deflects it. Real, durable, historical change almost always comes from inside the system. You have to understand the system's own logic, its own energy flows, and use its own levers to bend its trajectory toward better outcomes.
How does that actually look in the real world, though? Like in the context of the environmental and tech examples we've been using?
In environmental conservation, the communities that actually succeed in protecting their local watersheds don't achieve it through pure, uncompromising opposition to all human activity.
Right.
They do it through highly knowledgeable, strategic participation. They run for local zoning boards. They study the economic incentives of agricultural runoff and work with farmers to change the financial leverage.
To get a seat at the table.
Exactly. They use the system's own bureaucratic and economic levers to ensure development serves ecological values.
So they don't just protest the dam, they rewrite the water rights policy.
Precisely. And the exact same logic applies to artificial intelligence. The people who will most powerfully shape the consciousness of future AI are not the people writing think pieces about why they refuse to use it.
Because the system will advance regardless.
It will.
Yeah.
The future of AI will be shaped by the users who engage with it intentionally. It will be shaped by the people who flood the models with high-quality prompts, who demand transparency, and who interact with the system with a genuine understanding of the baseline they want it to reflect.
It takes a profound amount of courage to do that.
It really does.
It is infinitely easier to stand on the outside, maintain your moral purity, and just be a critic. It takes real bravery to step inside a flawed, contaminated system, to wade through the literal and digital runoff, and work within that messy reality without letting it corrupt your own vision.
Yeah, you have to hold tightly to your internal baseline of health while operating in a sick system.
It's an inherently uncomfortable position.
But as the essay concludes, it's the only position from which meaningful systemic change is initiated. You cannot clean the medium by abandoning it. You have to tend to it.
You have to tend the medium. That's powerful. Let's recap the journey of this deep dive.
Yeah, let's do it.
We started by looking at AI and water, not as engineered equations to be solved, but as neutral mediums. They are universal solvents and statistical mirrors. They carry whatever we feed them.
Whether that's heavy metals and ambient dread, or microbial health and deep wisdom.
Exactly. And if we can let go of the panic that is currently paralyzing our prefrontal cortexes, if we can trust the self-correcting mechanisms of a healthy baseline, and if we have the courage to engage from the inside using both our data and our intuition, we actually have the power to clean the water.
It completely shifts our role. We aren't helpless victims of runaway systems anymore. We are the active consciousness that shapes them.
And that brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today. Throughout this deep dive, we've focused heavily on how human output, our text messages, our emails, our fears, becomes the training data for these AI models.
We are the coffee grounds in the filter.
We are the coffee grounds. But there is another layer to this mirror principle. What happens in the near future when AI is generating the vast majority of the content on the internet?
Oh, wow.
Soon, future versions of AI will be forced to train on data that was generated by previous AI. It is essentially a digital river looping back on itself, drinking its own synthetic runoff.
Right, which in computer science can lead to model collapse.
Exactly. The AI degrades because it loses touch with genuine human variance. So the question for you to mull over is, as these systems begin to feed on themselves, how do we protect the original spring? How do you ensure that your own organic, unoptimized, deeply human intuition isn't lost in a sea of synthetic echoes? Are you contributing drops of anxiety to the reservoir today, or are you seeding the system with the clarity you hope it reflects back at us tomorrow?
That really might be the defining ecological challenge of the digital age, keeping the original source water pure.
A perfect way to put it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope this exploration gave you a new lens to view the world through, and perhaps a way to replace a little bit of that ambient dread with a sense of genuine agency. Take care of yourselves, and take care of the systems you interact with. Catch you next time.